Hi, my name is Stephanie McCullough. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods and Community Engagement, and I want to thank you all for coming out to this event tonight, or today, because it's still morning. I've been doing a lot of transit talks, so I'm a little off my game today. I see we have Nancy Van Rees coming in as for council, and I want to thank her for coming. Y'all really can't hear me? Okay. I'm going to just go stand right here. So we're here today just to kind of help with the BAO office and their work with increasing the diversity and inclusion of small and minority-owned businesses within the metro sphere. Mayor Berry and now Mayor Briley consistently stated that DBE and MBE participation has to be a key emphasis in the Mayor's Office of Economic and Community Development, and that we are committed to being intentional about the growth and development of women and minority business participation within metro procurement. And now I have to talk. This one for these guys. Okay. Let's see. So Mayor Berry and now Mayor Briley set out to have multiple listening sessions to hear firsthand from minority business owners with the good and the bad of their experience working with Metro. We've had 3 of those so far, and we're using that feedback to kind of craft what we're doing moving forward with how we run these sessions. Because of the growth and capacity of our minority and women-owned business is so important to the progress of projects we're doing in the future, and particularly the transit plan. We're looking at ways to increase that capacity to be at least 30% throughout the transit planning process and construction. That's one of the commitments we've made as a city to make sure that we're doing that. So with all of you being here, I appreciate you being here to learn more about the process. If there's any other questions that you have about kind of doing business or with the mayor's office, we're always here to listen. So I'll be in the back for most of the presentation if you have any other questions for us. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jerval Watson.
Good morning. Thank you, Stephanie. Again, from the Business Assistance Office, we'd like to welcome you. A few housekeeping rules. First and foremost, if you parked out in the parking lot and you paid to park, Joseph out front at the front desk will be validating parking tickets. So on your way out, stop by and check with him, and he'll give you a validation so that you don't have to pay for parking. Number 2, we want to thank you for being here. This is a great opportunity for you to learn to do more about business with Metro, and we definitely want that. By a show of hands, can you let me know who in here is registered to do business with Metro currently? Awesome. But not good, because this side of the room, I don't know why, seems to be not registered. So we definitely want to get you registered to do business with Metro, because in order for you to do business with Metro, you have to be registered. We'll walk you through some of those components, but know that we have that accessibility here for you today. And Jamie will talk a little bit more about that with you. So first things first. Today, we want to share an abundance of information with you. First and foremost, we want you to know how to stay on top of notifications from the system. Our system, which is iSupplier, you can do that via the effective use of Bob. How the Business Assistance Office can support you. The most important thing about our office department name is assistance. We assist businesses. That is our job. We want you to know what we can do to help you. That's what we do on a day-to-day basis. The process and benefits of certification. If you are not currently certified as a minority and woman-owned business, you definitely want to hone in on that information, because you need that for a multitude of reasons. And understanding the purchasing process. We do not want you to just say, hey, I want to do business with Metro. We want you to know how to do it effectively, and be successful at that. And tips for responding to solicitations. Like, you need to know all those things. We want to empower you to move forward, and we want everybody in this room at some point to say, I am currently doing business with Metro. And last but not least, the key takeaways. We never want you to be here and not leave with information. So one important thing is, of course, is networking. That is imperative for you to be able to meet new people, develop new business relationships, and develop an opportunity to do business with the people beside you. So if I could ask everybody in this room to stand up, please. Thank you. Now, if you'll turn to your right and introduce yourself to the person beside you, and if there's no one beside you, you can turn behind you. But let them know who you are, your business name. Whoa, right into it. Awesome. Okay, and please don't hesitate to turn to your left and do the same.
Nice to meet you. Okay, if you could begin to wrap those introductions up, please. Thank you. I like this room. Y'all follow directions well. So the benefit here is that while I was sitting here waiting on you all to introduce yourselves to your neighbors, I heard a lot of communication. And it sounded like that you all didn't know each other, because typically when you know the person beside you, it doesn't take as long to introduce yourself. The important thing in here is that we want you to do business with Metro, but more importantly, we want you to do business with each other. There are a multitude of opportunities right here in this very room. Do not miss an opportunity to network with the people beside you, because I'm perfectly sure that each business needs somebody else in this room. So there's an opportunity to build business capacity just by working with your peers. So please don't ever miss that opportunity. First things first, every supplier is important to Metro's procurement process, which is why it is imperative that you be registered in our system. So what I would like for you to say to you first and foremost is, for those individuals that are in this room and that are not registered, if you don't have the tools necessary to register you today with our people in the back of the room, get it done. It takes 15 minutes to register in our system. It is not a labor-intensive process. I like to tell people you can do it on your lunch break while you eat half of your sandwich. I'll use Mr. Corey Carney here. He was at one of our other trainings, and we talked about it, and he got right into the system. He was already in the system, but it allowed us the opportunity to communicate about how he could better benefit from the use of being in the system. True, Mr. Carney?
Yes.
So make sure that you make sure that is done. If you don't have it done, if you're not sure, check. You want to be registered in the system. Even if you aren't sure you want to do business with Metro, you need to know when there's an opportunity coming down the pike. Next, the more suppliers, the more better options we have. We don't want to just do business with Mr. Brian Gleason, who can't do business with Metro, but because he works for Metro, we don't want to just do business with him. There's other opportunities with other business owners that work in his same industry. So it provides us with different options. It provides suppliers the ability to partner with one another, and it also provides opportunities for primes to subcontract. So we want to make sure we have as many suppliers in our system that are available to us. As we said, we want to make sure that you register online. If you have any questions at all, you want to make sure you go to nashville.gov. At nashville.gov, what I like to tell people is in the top right-hand corner, in the search box, you can type in iSupplier and it'll take you right to the registration if you don't get registered today. If you have questions about how to utilize iSupplier and things of that nature, you can go there too. Their link is provided for you, but again, as I said, just type in iSupplier registration in the search box and you can get right to it. I have the pleasure of turning this over to Ms. Jamie Hunter, who is the iSupplier iProcurement Training Coordinator. She is the guru. She is here for you today to help explain to you how to be registered in our system and some ins and outs. Jamie?
Hello. It's nice to meet you. I'm just going to go over some simple things that you can do to get registered. I have a table set up back there where that you can drop your business card in and I can email you the information. You can also sign up if you don't have your business card and I'll email you information. If you're not sure and you signed up, I'll check to see if you're sure and then send you some other helpful information that you can navigate the system with. Oh, I'm going to have to speak up. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. So the first thing, how do I go next? Just hit him. I'm looking for this page. Okay. First thing is when I send you the link, you're going to go to, let's get rid of this. I'm sorry, I can't see this. You're going to go to this iSupply registration page. No, it's keep going back. Okay. I'm not touching anything.
Don't touch it.
All right, sorry, I'm not touching anything. That was her. Okay, and when you get to this page, you just need some simple information. You're going to need your company name, your tax ID, your email address, and your name and phone number. Now, I suggest strongly that when you do your email address, that you set up a company distribution email, so that way if someone leaves, then you don't have to keep changing your username. So like it would be whatever you could say accounts receivable at yourcompany.com. And that way, if it's going to specific people, that distribution, then if that person leaves, then you can just take them off your distribution list. Or you can also just sign up with your name, because your username, can I just hit next? It's going to be your email address. In order to register, you would need to have your tax ID, and then although you don't need your W-9 or your ACH form, it's always nice to attach that when you go register, because even if you don't respond to a solicitation, other metro departments may use you as a vendor for something that you're supplying, and you would need that to get your vendor number. You want to select the appropriate products and codes, because that's what drives your invitations for your solicitation. You also want to indicate your business classification, because some of those have perks, like you, instead of getting paid 30 days, if you're a small business or minority owned, you can get paid in 15 days. So you do want to go ahead and put your classification in, or you can talk to Brian about how to get a classification. You want to complete all the required fields. The magnifying glass is going to help you search for things that you can't find, and we are here to assist you. If you need assistance, you can contact the iSupplier.nashville.gov iSupplier@nashville.gov, or you can pick up one of our cards and call me direct, and I'll help you navigate through the system on getting registered and looking up bids. You got a question?
If we wanted to add a code, would we talk to you?
If you want to add a code, you can talk to me. I'll send you information or talk to you direct. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Is it possible to change that email address?
Your email address?
Yeah.
You can change your email address. You can also add other users, so you can have more than one email address for people to log into your account. Go ahead.
If one is a sole proprietor, and you mentioned the tax ID number, will the Social Security work, or does somebody have to have a 62-1?
Okay, the question was if you're a sole proprietor and you don't have a EIN and you want to use your Social Security, if you're doing business under that Social Security with the IRS, yes, you can use your Social Security number to register. I do suggest you don't put dashes in because it's harder to find you. Any other questions? All right, like I said, my card is back there on the table. If you can't think of any now, you can contact me and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Back to you.
Thank you, Jamie. As Jamie stated, she's available for you. She will be in the back of the room, so please don't hesitate to ask any additional questions that you may have. Also, please remember that if you are not registered with Metro currently, we are registering in the back of the room. You just need to have your basic information that Jamie has shared with you. And if not, 15 minutes. Always remember it's 15 minutes. It's not labor intensive, but we definitely want to get you registered. We're here on site to do so. If you've got your credentials, let's get it done. So if you are registered with Metro, once you're in our system and you have put in your industry codes, then you will receive workflow mailers as notifications of opportunities that fall within your industry. For those of you that are registered with us currently, are you familiar with the workflow mailers? Yes? Yeah. Woo, whoa, hands up. I only saw, okay, that's not enough hands. I saw a lot more hands of people that were registered with us. Are you individuals that are registered with Metro not currently receiving workflow mailer notifications? Head nods, something for me? No. So that is a reason for you to go to the back of the room and check with Ms. Hunter or whomever else is back there so that you can find out why not. Because what happens is if you're in the system and you're currently registered, you will receive workflow mailers when there are opportunities that fall within your industry. If you're not receiving those workflow mailers, you need to be concerned. But we've got help for you because our Business Opportunities Bulletin, which you can access through Nashville.gov, also has any solicitations that are out on the streets listed. So if you want to find out, even when you're not receiving workflow mailers, of other opportunities that are taking place that may not be directly related to your industry, you can go to the Business Opportunities Bulletin, which we call Bob, and check that out. As it states here, you can see the bids, requests for proposals, anything of that nature you can find out there. If not, the Business Assistance Office is also here available to you if you have questions. But I want to point out a couple of things because Bob is an effective, useful tool. But we want you to get notifications when it's things in your industry, because what happens is once you receive those workflow mailers, you've got to log into the system and review that solicitation. What it does is it empowers you, one, to determine if that solicitation is what you can deem viable for you to bid on, or if you deem it viable to try to sub with. It's a lot of things that you need to find out regarding that solicitation other than just knowing there's an opportunity out there. Great. So it's a couple of things before I turn it over to my tag team partner, Mr. Gleason. Please make sure that you are up to date in the system. We want you, hopefully, as much as you want us. So make sure you're registered. All of your industry codes are up to date and are correct. Please don't make any assumptions that it's out there. Check it periodically. Somebody asked about changing the email address. If it is not you, the business owner, or someone in your company that is registered in our system, maybe they're getting those emails and you aren't. So you want to definitely make sure you go out there and check whether you're registered or not to make sure your emails are up to date, because that's the information that prime contractors may be trying to reach you to do business. So make sure that stuff is up to date. Make sure you're registered in the system and make sure that you use Bob. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Gleason.
Excuse me, Ms. Watson?
Yes, ma'am.
What does the subject line have in terms of those workflow communications?
It says workflow mailer notification.
In the subject line?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So what I'll say is, because I saw some hands go up when it was asked, are you receiving workflow mailers? One thing I would say is you need to check your spam box as well, because if it's not a trusted source, then it'll automatically go to your spam box. Okay, first thing I want to say is good morning to everybody. Myself, I like to give my own greeting outside of the greeting that was done in the beginning. As Javal mentioned, my name is Brian Gleason, and I am the Business Assistance Office Manager. My team consists of Ms. Judy Cantlin, which is in the back. If you've done business with Metro before, sent any documents or anything like that, that's the person you've talked to. Ms. Javal Watson here is our Business Development Officer. Ms. Javal sets up all of our training throughout the year. She works with businesses to get them where they need to be capacity-wise, direct you in whichever way you need to go to get those resources that you may need. We have 3 other individuals that's not here that's manning the office. That's Ms. Tina Burt, who is a contract compliance specialist, Mr. Jeremy Fry, also a contract compliance specialist, as well as Ms. Joanne Carr, who is a contract compliance specialist. So if you don't see them, that's because they're there, but all of us work closely together, and I always say it's just not a team, we function as a family as well. First thing is, the question was asked is, how can the Business Assistance Office service you? One is you may hear me mention BAO, because that's what we are for short. Instead of saying Business Assistance Office, keep saying that and get tongue-tied, you might hear me say BAO. So, the BAO is in charge, we are charged with administering 2 programs. One of the programs that we're charged with administering is the Procurement Non-Discrimination Program, and you'll also hear me reference that as the PNP program. And then we also manage the Small Business Program, but then maybe a year or 2, we added in the Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Program as well. So Small Business Program as well as Service Disabled Vet-Owned Program are looked upon as the same. So I would say if someone is an approved small business, and that's approved by Metro, as well as a certified service disabled owned veteran, if you propose on a bid, you won't be double incentivized. However, you will be incentivized for one. Also, what we do is we make policy recommendations related to the PNP program as well as the small business program. We provide business development opportunities as well as training, and prepare quarterly and annual business utilization reports. Those reports can be found on our website. If you can't find them, then you can always email somebody on our team, or you can email me myself. But those reports are great reference items that tell you how much we've spent, who we spent those dollars with in regards to subcontractors as well as primes, and the industry class in which we spent those dollars. And last but not least, as I mentioned, the members of our staff. The programmatic approach for the BAO is a 5-pronged approach in how we look to maximize SWMBE businesses. One is through business development and outreach. As I said, that's what Ms. Javal does, as well as business status confirmation and verification, the procurement process involvement, contract compliance, and dispute resolution. So for dispute resolution, what I mean by that is sometimes you may have a prime contractor that says, call our office and say, we don't want to use this subcontractor. Okay, we need to know why. We not only just take the prime contractor's word, what we'll do is we'll call that subcontractor and ask them, hey, what's going on? We don't ever want to say such called us, because we don't want to damage that relationship. It's our job where we want to actually mend that relationship and keep that relationship where it's at. So what we do is we'll bring both parties, it's almost like mediation, bring both parties to the table, and a lot of times it's just a matter of one not hearing the other. And a lot of times once you sit down at that table, that problem is not a problem once we're done, and they can continue with that relationship, move forward. So that's something that we do. Contract compliance, I'll talk about that more in depth on the back part, but that's just saying that what we do is we ensure that prime contractors are meeting and or exceeding their proposed levels of commitment to their SMWBEs. And we do that based on the submission and reporting of their pay docs, as well as, like, they'll submit their cancel checks, invoices, payment application, lien waivers, all of that. We need to see that to verify that those committed or proposed subcontractors are actually being used and paid. Business status confirmation is merely, as I said, approved small business. Metro, we do our own small business approvals. If you're looking for a certification, then Javal is going to talk about those certifying entities in which we accept certifications from. We do not certify at Metro. If you're a service disabled veteran, then you'll go through the Governor's Office of Diversity Business Enterprise and get certified that way, and just provide us a copy of your certificate. At this point, at this time, I'll turn you over to Ms. Javal, who is our guru of certifying entities. She once worked at a certifying entity and can tell you, everything there is to know about the certifying entities, what type of certifying entity you, depending on what your business do and what type of business you're trying to do, whether it's local, whether it's with corporate America, corporate businesses, or if you're just looking to do federal projects. She's the person to go to and steer you in that direction of which agency to go to for your certification. So at this time, I'll turn you back over to Javal.
As Brian stated, I had the great pleasure of working at a certifying entity here locally. And the first thing I want to tell you is certification is not required, but it is beneficial. Don't ever hesitate to think that you don't want to certify your business. And I think that I want to, just out of some conversations that we've had, want to express to you the importance of it. Number one, it confirms that you're a bona fide minority, woman-owned, service-disabled company. And there might be a question like, why do I have to restart? People don't want to certify sometimes for a multitude of reasons. I think one I recently heard was, why do I need to reconfirm that I'm a woman-owned business every year? I'm always going to be a woman. Rightfully so, but what we don't know is that whether you as a woman own, manage, and control that business every year. Things change on a year-to-year basis, and so that is the reason why the confirmation is necessary. Now, what I do want to point out to you is that every certifying entity their certification expires at different times. So don't ever think that it's annually for everyone. Some are annually, some are every 2 years, some are every 3 years. It varies, and the list doesn't stop there. As Brian stated, we do not certify at Metro, but we do have this list here, and it's also attached in your packet. We accept these certifying entities. You can see the list there. The Governor's Office of Diversity Enterprise, the Tri-State Minority Supplier Development Council, WeBank, a multitude of them. You want to do, what I like to tell people is certify with as many organizations as you want to do business with their database, because each one of these organizations have some of the same members and some of them that are different. So if you want to do business with corporations, then you want to make sure as a woman-owned business you certify with WeBank or TSMSDC if you're an ethnic minority. If you want to do business with the government, you want to make sure you register with GoDBE. But what I would say to you is for me, if it were I would not stop at one certification. But I would say to you, register with as many certifying entities that you have the time for, that you can afford to, and that you want to do business with. Those are the 3 components that are necessary. And it is vital because it's a process, but once you certify with one certifying entity, most of them require a lot of the same things. It ebbs and flows a little bit because one may ask for something different than the other in addition to, but the basic components of your certification package is the same. So once you get all those documents together, keep them together in a file. It will make your process much easier, and it will allow you the accessibility to certify with more entities. If I may go back, As it states here, it provides you with direct access to those certified entities. Every certification entity has a database. They have most of them have training opportunities, and most of them have networking opportunities. What I would like to say is that Metro, we developed, along with other business resource organizations locally, the Collaboration for Excellence group. And what we try to do is make sure that we bring networking opportunities to you so that you don't have to jump through hoops and go to all these organizations. We want you to be involved and get the benefits from each organization, but we don't want to make you work any harder than working on and in your business. We want you to be able to receive that access, but without it being labor intensive. Most of them have technical assistance and, like I said, training opportunities, and they provide a multitude of information. Don't hesitate to be certified. I like to tell people, when you're certified at Metro, if you're certified and registered as a small business, it's like the two-start program. It doesn't mean that you won't win a solicitation, but what it does mean is it provides you a little extra benefit. It's just like when you're in school, you got stars by your name. It's like having a star by your name. And that's really how you have to look at it. It's a benefit to it. It's worth it. Don't hesitate to do it. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. But like I said, these are the certifying entities that we accept. They are listed in the packet if you received a packet. If not, stop by and speak with Etta. Etta has it in the back of the room, and it lists all the certifying entities that we accept. If you already certified one of these entities and you're registered in our system but don't have that certificate or letter attached to your account, email it over to us and we just automatically apply that to your account. Awesome. Mr. Gleason? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
One question. Is there value in certifying as both a woman-owned and minority-owned business, or do they basically carry the same weight, so it doesn't make sense to go down both avenues?
In my opinion, my personal opinion and professional opinion, yes. Because what it does is relate back to what I just said. So like, and I'll use as an example, because you're an ethnic woman, I'll say if you're registered with TSMSDC, then TSMSDC has a database of corporations that fall within their membership. Coca-Cola, UPS, JCI, I'm just throwing out a couple that they have on their database. Awesome. But if you're registered with WeBank as a woman-owned business, WeBank may have some of those same relationships, and a lot of corporations cross-reference. But who's to say that there's not a corporation that's on WeBank's database that's not on TSMSDC's database? It may be one or two here and there. Locally, I can't use Cracker Barrel because Cracker Barrel is on both lists. And I'm trying to think of a company that I could use, but there may be corporations that are local to one organization's location, region, that may not be on the other. And a lot of them are the same. I mean, you can see that when you go around and visit and do some of the networking opportunities and training. But what I always say is I would not want to remove an opportunity from my belt if it's out there.
Right.
And that's really what it boils down to. It's an opportunity. So yes, I would register as both, because you don't know what, and every company, corporation, entity is different. They may say, well, we want to get woman-owned businesses. We have an opportunity coming up and we want woman-owned businesses on this particular contract. Or it may be that they want a minority-owned business on this contract. So you're alleviating an opportunity if you don't have both. So yes, ma'am. The quick and dirty answer is yes. Anyone else? Thank you.
Okay, and the last piece that I want to talk to about, one that I mentioned that's very, very important, that I would say is the contract compliance piece. The contract compliance says is that what we do is we serve as an advocate for you throughout the procurement process. How do we do that? One is the pre-award phase. Pre-award phase says that the BAO staff rep will go to the pre-offer meetings. They will tell you about the programs that's applied to that solicitation. Just know that not all solicitations have the same requirements or programs applied. Programs are applied by myself based on the scope of work that was supplied by the department. So I'll review that and say, hey, I know there's availability, we can do this. It may be a requirement saying that we're gonna put a 15% or 20% SBE requirement or SDV requirement, saying that whoever bid on this solicitation as a prime must come in with 20% or higher. Anything less than, when they submit their bid, can be deemed as non-responsive because they did not meet the requirement. It can be a threshold. We know that there's availability, but it's kind of iffy. So we'll say, if you really want this to be incentivized, may it be by points or an evaluated bid discount. What we're saying is that if there's a 15% threshold, they're saying that the prime contractor must come in with at least 15% or more in order to be incentivized and or awarded those extra points. A lot of times I would say is when you're looking at the solicitation itself and you look at the scoring part back there where it breaks down how many points, cost may be, how much team qualifications, how much your programmatic approach may be, and you'll see down there where it has small business, 5 points, no more than 10 points. I know that looks very small, but trust and believe, that's a big number. Because if you're sitting at that 2-point mark that puts you over that assumed apparent winner, by you being an approved small business bidding as the prime and or that prime bidding and then proposing to utilize you, they can get that point to help them win that bid. And so we'll do that, tell our programs what we do at the pre-offer meetings. And then what we do also is we serve as, once you go through that process, we serve on the evaluation committee meeting, not as voting members, but at the advisory capacity. Meaning we want to make sure that nobody is being eliminated, nothing is being done unfair to our DBEs or anything like that. So we're there as your voice inside. Secondly is the post-award process. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but that just says right there that we're monitoring that project to make sure that that prime contractor is doing what they said they would do. If they said they was going to utilize you at 20%, 10%, 5%, whatever the case may be, we want to make sure that they're doing that. We hold them accountable. How do we do that? That's by the receipt of their utilization documents. What they have to do as a prime contractor, whoever won the contract, one is they must provide us with, report their payments in the system, and they are required to report their payments on a monthly basis. Do they just report their payments and that's it? No. They need to submit to us canceled checks. If they did it by EFT or wire, we need the actual transmission sheet. We just had one where they did an EFT payment and they sent in an email with just verbiage. We can't accept that. We need to see that barcode, something that makes it official, because people can go in the system and create anything nowadays in Excel, Word, or what have you. So we actually need the documentation, as I said, canceled checks. We don't want to see just copies of a check that you wrote. We need to see the front and back copy of the check to say that that subcontractor received the check, they cashed the check. So we want to verify that, as well as any other proof of your invoices, if it's a construction job, all those other documents to support that. If a prime contractor fails to report on a monthly basis, staff is, we send out non-compliance notices quarterly. So if we hadn't heard from a prime contractor every month, even if there's no activity, they should be sending something saying there's no activity for the month and or we're waiting on canceled checks, whatever the case may be. But we need to hear from them. Failure to do so will result in us sending them a non-compliance letter saying, as of today, we have not heard from you. You have not reported your documentation. Reiterate what was in the contract, and it's pretty much a breach of contract. And we can work with the department to hold your payments. Once that threat go out there, then you start getting a whole flood of stuff coming in. So that's how we serve you. And what I would say and leave you with is, by all means, as Javal said, we're not the business assistance office just to be sitting there. We're there for you. We want to help you. We want to do whatever we can to assist you. And if you've never worked with Metro, and hopefully you do as a prime or a subcontractor, if there's ever any payment issues, you hadn't been paid or anything like that, never feel that you can't call us to let us know. Don't wait months down the line, because I always say it's best to be proactive than to be reactive. And we take that very serious, because we know as small minority women-owned businesses that one check can make or break you. And again, we want to make sure, let us know as soon as possible so we can research and say, hey, we need to make sure that they're getting paid. Why haven't they been paid? And if we need to hold payment, then that's what we need to do in order for them to get paid. But again, we can't do what you need us to do unless you tell us what's going on. Again, you are our eyes and ears out there. So never ever feel that you can't call us. We're here, we're always here. If you can't reach one, there's always somebody there. May it be by phone or by email. You have any questions for me? If not, yes, sir.
Well, I just have a question in general. And kind of about iSupplier and the process itself. I'm registered with the city, and I am a service disabled veteran, but I'm not registered with the city as a service disabled veteran yet. But I have been trying to land contracts. I'm in the technology space, and I see 20 or so things out on Bob every month. And it's a lot of us just sitting here kind of hands out, like wondering what's going to come to me, right? And last month, or actually last week, we saw the city of Atlanta have to shut down for an entire day, all their employees, because they had a cyber attack. I sell cybersecurity services. I set 3 or 4 of these things. I've tried to engage Metro a little bit on how to maybe use some of those federal dollars that have been diverted to the states and to the cities to try to improve cybersecurity. Yet, it's like talking to a blank wall. I don't need to. And so I'm wondering what can be done to actually show the government how to be protected, how to engage them to learn about the services that are available so that it can get to Bob. And that's just my feedback on it as someone who's really been trying to land contracts since October of last year and probably seen maybe 2 or 3 things that were even remotely biddable in an area that should have tons of work to be done in a multi-million, with a city the size of Nashville. So that's just my comments. I don't know how to address it, but I'd like to be part of the solution if possible.
Well, one thing that I would recommend, and that is to work with us, and then you'll hear from the Chief Procurement Officer right behind me, but we can help try to facilitate that conversation with the Director of Finance, ITS, our Information Technology System Services. That's something that may have been thought of, but not really thought about, something you can pitch to them. But again, that's something that we can probably set up that conversation to have with them. Now, as far as opportunities out there, do you just do cybersecurity?
IT and cybersecurity.
Okay, so we have a lot of IT stuff that come out. But one thing I want to say, you said you are registered with us, but you have not submitted your certificate.
Only because, and then again, this is the rules kind of conflicting with one another, but the governors, the state SWMBE requires you to be in business for 2 years. And so at the time that I applied, which was January, I was at like month 23 or something, so I wasn't there. And I just haven't had time to go back and reapply. But again, even then, that shows how delayed we are with technology procurement, because when you've got startups out here coming with the latest technology and you're saying, hey, it's going to be 2 years before you can even get the benefit, so it's all a process, but it can be frustrating to navigate sometimes for a small business owner.
So, and I definitely understand the importance of, like I said, time and money for a small business. That's everything. But what I would say is don't stop. Go to them, that's the state, and reapply, get your letter of certification, provide that letter to us. What we'll do is we'll go into your vendor profile, check that box. The benefit of having, as Val said, being a certified minority woman-owned business, being an approved small business, being a certified SDV is because when those programs are attached to those solicitations, if it's a minority woman-owned business, then that goes to the procurement non-discrimination program. What that says that if you want to bid on this project as a prime, then you must meet the PMP requirements. And that says that they must reach out to a minimum of 3 registered and certified MWBEs. And how they know that they're registered and certified is because we recommend that they run a list out of our system based on those areas in which they're looking to subcontract. And so if you're not certified, but you're registered, you wouldn't be on that list. The same thing applies, the small business and service disabled vet program, that's an incentivized based program. Like I said, you can either, if it's an RFP, that prime can be awarded points, or if it's an ITB, it's based on an evaluated bid discount. The purchasing agent will go through that in depth, but what happens is they'll again run a list of those that we have in our system that's registered and or certified, and then if you're on there, then that's more than likely that they'll contact you. But one sure way to get contacted, one thing, business is all about relationship. And so whenever they have a pre-offer meeting, you may not be bidding on it as the prime. But when you see that there's a solicitation that may interest you, but you probably don't have the capacity or just don't want to do it as a prime, but want to be a subcontractor, I recommend you go to the pre-offer meeting. Put your face out there, put your face with a name, and then that way, because a lot of prime contractors, people are just not willing, especially today, to just go through a list and just randomly pick somebody. At the end of the day, your brand is your brand, and you want to protect that. And so you want to make sure whoever gets on my boat or whoever's going to be on my team, I want to make sure that they provide just as good service and a product as I do. So I would say make sure you attend the pre-offer meetings. Never feel like you're wasted time, because as the saying goes, the squeaky wheel always gets the oil. So.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Brian. You said that when you go to these pre-bid meetings, that you're determining whether there are small or disadvantaged businesses that exist that could cover the project that they're going to bid out.
So,
how do you know what the pool is that's
well,
available for
okay.
you to decide, oh yeah, there are plenty of small businesses, or no, there are not plenty of small businesses?
So how that works is, once could you repeat the question again for me, so I can, because
I said, you said that you go to a pre
offer meeting.
A pre-offer
Yes.
meeting where they're deciding what the incentives are going to be, and you said that you use your knowledge of what the skills are that are out there in the small and disadvantaged business community. How do you know what those skills are for you to make a determination? Oh yeah, there are plenty of people who could bid on this, or no, there aren't, so I'm going to keep the incentives lower because there simply aren't small businesses or disadvantaged.
Okay.
How do you know what those skills are?
Did everybody hear the question? Okay, good. Okay, it's a lot. She was asking me to repeat the question. I was saying that's a lot to repeat. So as long as everybody heard it, that's the most important thing. So I don't go to the pre-offer meetings to make the determination as to the availability. The availability meaning who's out there, what's ready to do business with the city. Once the department sends their requisition to central procurement, it'll be assigned to a buyer. That buyer will work with the department to solidify the scope of work. Once the scope of work has been finalized, then that buyer will send that solicitation request to me. I'll look at the scope of work that's been finalized and see what are some possible subcontracting opportunities that we can get participation. Say, for instance, if it is janitorial services, a lot of businesses out there. So for our janitorial contract, before that went out, once the solicitation came in, what we said was that project, the prime contractor can only self-perform 15% of the work and have to bid out to the DBEs at least 85%. Why did we have such a large number? Because it was proven from the last contract. We have a slew of them. And so based on the scope of work, that's when we'll go ahead and apply a program. If there's any registered and certified MWBEs, the availability is there, PMP is applied. So if we have, like, for demolition projects, we know that we have a lot of small businesses that do demolition. So based on the scope of work, how many houses or whatever needs to be torn down, I may make the recommendation to the purchasing agent, hey, I think this will be a good candidate for a small business set aside. And so if that's approved, then that's the program that's applied that says that the only people that can bid on this are approved small businesses. So once you go into the pre-offer meeting, once the solicitation is published, if you read down there, down by the small business section, and then if they have a section called the Procurement Non-Discrimination Program, you'll see what programs are applied, and if it is just an incentive, a requirement, or a threshold, and what that percentage is. So you'll know once the solicitation goes out what we're looking for, what they have to do. Yes, sir.
I'm asking a question on behalf of my wife, my company. She wasn't able to be here today. My wife is a federal investigator, so she does work for Homeland Security, the CIA, the FBI, fraud, waste, and abuse. Her question is with regard to certification. What measures does the city have in place to ensure that women-owned businesses in particular are genuinely women-owned businesses? Because she's seeing an uptick where businesses are claiming that they are owned by women, they're not on site, they're not doing work. So what measures do you have on the front side? And then her question is also that if you find out that a company is deeming themselves as a woman-owned company and get a contract and they're not, what sort of recourses do you all have in place to, I guess, prosecute or whatever the process is on your side?
But that's a good question. One is, remember, Metro, we don't certify. So we rely on those certifying entities to validate and to certify based on the knowledge that they obtain if this is actually owned by a woman-owned business.
But if
Now,
you award that contract,
Now, if they were awarded the contract by Metro, and if we get some notification or some flag to say, hey, this business that just won this contract, they're not owned by this woman. Well, we go by the certificate that was awarded. Now, what we will do is communicate that to the certifying agency, and they can investigate because they're the ones that issued the certificate.
but it seems like there's an amount of fraud though that would be involved in that. So if that happens, do you all notify an entity? I don't know why she's asking this question because I think she's interested
And I'll
in a service too.
refer to Javal on this too, because as I said, by working with the certifying entity before coming over to Metro.
And so what I would say is first and foremost, that's why the requirement is so big when you're certifying, of providing a litany of documents. And I used to work for the Tri-State Minority Supplier Development Council. There are a litany of documents. If you've ever become certified, then you know that you must turn in. And their whole thing is a three-prong approach: own, managed, and control. So if by chance, because everybody's not, there's more certifying entities out there than the ones we vetted and accepted. The ones we vetted and accepted, there are requirements such as site visits, the documentation. The department has gone through and looked at every component that they require in order for you to be certified. So for Metro, what I would say is the certifying entities that we accept, all of them, you wouldn't find one on there. Very unlikely. And if you do, then again, that's where Brian said, if we're contacted, then we will contact the certifying entity. And you best believe that they're going to investigate that and confirm whether that is true or not, because what that does is that diminishes their withstanding of saying, hey, our certified MWBEs are certified, and they're certified because of this. Because at that point, then it makes their certification process invalid. So I know why you're asking, because she's trying to see if there's an opportunity for her to do business there. And what I would say is not necessarily with us, because we don't do the certification process, but possibly with some of the certifying entities. There may be a bigger opportunity there.
Okay, I'll tell her that she's getting a lot of contracts around the country with entities that don't certify, cities, counties. She was just kind of wondering, what the response was.
And the process that Metro Nashville government has taken is, since we don't certify, we have vetted and applied these certifying entities to do the work for us.
Okay.
So there's a partnership there that we rely on them to do the job after we vetted them as certifying entities. So for Metro Nashville government, there's really not that opportunity there because we've taken a different route.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll have a question. So are tax required to disclose the percent that they're supposed to give to the subcontractors?
The question was, are prime contractors required to disclose the percentage that they have committed to subcontractors? You should know that.
Because in some instances we've asked and they have not told us, so there's no way of us making sure that we're getting all the work that we were supposed to get under the contract.
Now, are you saying in what process? Because the reason why I'm asking in what phase of the process is because usually if you're a certified minority woman-owned business, they've contacted you and said, hey, we're bidding on this project in writing. We're bidding on this project. Here's what we're looking for you to possibly do. Can you provide us with a bid? You submit them a bid, they accept the bid, then one is you already know what the amount is, okay? The second part of that is if they are awarded that contract, then they're required to submit to us the letter of intent to subcontract joint venture form. That's a form that they are required to fill out, send it to you. You sign it based on the agreement that was made between the two and send it back to us. Now, I would say as far as a small business or service-disabled veteran-owned business, there's really nothing that you will see afterwards. What you can do is, see who's been awarded, and you can contact us and say, hey, I've been awarded this. But one thing I can say now, if you are a small business, approved small business, a certified service-disabled vet or a certified MWBE, you should be receiving a copy of an intent to, an initial contract compliance letter, a copy of that. That letter is one from our office that is sent to the prime, just congratulating them on winning the project, but also reiterating who they say they're going to use and at what percentage they're going to use them.
And is there, you were talking earlier about the accountability of actually devoting X% to the small business, but is that something that you do on a monthly basis and keep track of? Because we have this contract agreement where we were supposed to get 3%, and we haven't had any work with them for the past year or so.
Okay, so two things. Yes, we do monitor on a monthly basis. One thing I would say is we need to talk because one is we need to understand and see what type of contract they have. If they have an IDIQ indefinite, deliverable indefinite quantity, then that's saying that they don't even know how much work they're going to get. And so this contract has been put in place just in case. And if Metro don't require any work, then there's no work to be given. And so what we do is we will monitor that. Now, if it is one where we know it's something that's ongoing, after a few months, year or so, when we're looking to reconcile and to, produce numbers to report, we want to know, okay, what's going on with the project? We not only just rely on the prime contractor, but we're going to call the department as well to see where you at in the phase of this work here. And then what we do is, that's why we ask on the forms, the subcontractor form, as well as the PNP forms, what scope of work this subcontractor is actually going to perform. Because we can identify where along the lines we should be seeing activity. And so if it's something that you have a question about, then make sure that you give us a call. But one good piece to that is, and I brought it to the attention of, and it was approved and said it was a good idea, is that what we're looking to do now is starting the beginning of the fiscal year, is to send out subcontractor certification, payment certification. So quarterly, we're looking to send out payment certifications to our subcontractors. So for instance, for that contract that you're working on, if they've reported $12,000 for that period, we're going to send you that number. This is for this time period, for this job. We need you to certify that you actually received this. That way everybody's on one accord, and when we get to the end, there's no surprises for anybody. Any other questions? Okay. At this time, I'll turn you over to the Chief Purchasing Agent, Ms. Michelle Lang.
It's still morning. Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? My husband jokes that I don't ever need a microphone. I think that means he's calling me a big mouth.
No, that's okay. Before I get started, I really just want to jump back to Mr. Mark's question. And that question was related to how we work to minimize fraud, DBE fraud in our procurement process. And that's a very important point because when you have programs like the ones that we have very deeply embedded in the procurement process, it's important for us to be taking measures to ensure that we're minimizing fraud to the extent that we're able. So Brian and Jerval talked a little bit about the process of certification. And what you should know is that the certifying entities that certify for the city were selected very specifically because the certifying procedures that they use are ones that are consistent with the requirements set forth in the procurement code for the procurement non-discrimination program. So we're specifically told that, told that, instructed in the code that we have to look for this, 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 and this. And those certifying entities meet those requirements, including site visits. That's one step. But if you were to look in the packet of information that you have, the certifying entities that are listed there is a little caveat on the bottom. Much of that is because I'm probably one of the more type A people you will meet. I want us to have an out. And what that means is if we find out that somebody is not meeting those requirements set forth in the code, even though we have the certifying entity that has certified them listed, that caveat specifies that we have the right to refuse it, period. So if we learn that, we can refuse their certificate. Also included in our contracts, we have language as it relates to misrepresentation. It is very specific to us when we provide, or important to us when we provide you with an incentive, especially for being a small business where we've certified it, but for any classification where we've approved it, but for any classification that you are who you say you are. And so there's a misrepresentation clause that's in there that basically says that if we find out that you've misrepresented your status, that it can be a breach of your contract. So that's another enforcement option that we have available to you as well. So it's important to us to make sure that we're doing business with who we say we're doing business with or who you say you are, because the programs that are provided that the folks have talked about are really designed to assist those small, minority, woman-owned, service-disabled, veteran-owned businesses who are seeking to really get in and do business with the city, which can often really help them grow their businesses. And we want to make sure that you're who you say you are and that you're doing what you said you would do. So I just want to touch that because I think it's important to kind of clarify that. All right, my name is Michelle Hernandez-Lane. I have the extraordinary privilege, of serving as the city's Chief Procurement Officer and Purchasing Agent. I have been in this role now, I guess, about 10 months, and I stay busy. I want to recognize Council Lady Nancy Van Rees, who's in the back, District 8. When she came in, she said, "How have you been doing?" And I said, "Busy." It's good busy. Being busy without it being good busy is not the best case scenario, but it's been very busy. I tell people that we buy everything. We buy the shoes that the inmates wear that are being managed by our sheriff. We buy ballparks. We buy bituminous material to make sure our roads are paved correctly. We buy landscaping. We buy everything. So you'll see a variety of different kinds of solicitation types that come out using that workflow mailer moniker that was discussed earlier. But we buy everything, and we want folks to know that they are able to be a part of this process and to participate because we want to maximize competition as much as we can. We want to buy the best products or services at the best price with maximum social inclusion, and we want to make sure that we're very intentional about all of those. So having said that, and I know I'm going to probably mess something up because I'm left to my own devices to move the slides, but I'm going to try not to. I want to make sure that as we talk to you about how to get registered, how to get certified, the benefits of being certified, how our Business Assistance Office works to support DBEs, that you also understand exactly how you can participate most effectively in the purchasing process. That is an important piece of it. I recently had a meeting with our Mayor Briley, and I told him, I said, as we work to maximize participation, the efforts are like the gears in a watch. There are three. If one of them doesn't work, your watch stops ticking and you don't know what time it is. Those efforts are business development and outreach, which is what Jerval is responsible for. Those efforts also include capacity building, making sure that you have folks who are ready, able, willing, and able to do the work, and the procurement process. If there's nothing built into the procurement process to really support the effort, then that gear in the watch stops working, and it really doesn't matter about all those other things that you're doing. It's kind of like a shot. It may work, it may not. But if they're all working together, then the gears turn and the watch keeps good time. And so making sure that you understand the procurement process and how we procure is important to the overall effort. So having said all of that, I want to talk a little bit about the various procurement methodologies that we use. And there's one that's not listed here, it should be E, and it is cooperative purchasing, and I'm going to bring you to it once we get to that point in the process. We engage in delegated purchasing authority, we use invitations to bid, we use requests for proposals, we engage in some sole source procurement, we also engage in cooperative purchasing. And I want to talk to you about each one of those individually. So based upon the procurement code and the way that it reads, I'm responsible for everything. I feel like I'm responsible for everything. I am responsible for procuring and managing the procurement process for everything. But what the procurement code and the regulations allow me to do is to delegate certain elements of that purchasing process to the departments individually. So we have delegated purchasing agreements with our departments that allow them to purchase up to $10,000 without it having to come through my office. They have rules that define how they should be engaging that process, but it allows them to engage in it. So if they're going to buy something and it costs $5,700, there are some rules that they have to abide by, which is to get written quotes, if it's over $5,000. If it's under, they can get 3 verbal quotes. If it's under 1,000, they can get 1 verbal quote. So we give them the guidelines for how they procure depending upon the value of what they're going to buy. And so it allows them to go ahead and purchase those things without going through this approver and going through that approver and now coming over to purchasing, and now purchasing has to bid it out, when it's really a simple and more efficient way for them to get what they need to deliver services to the residents of Davidson County. So I jumped ahead of myself a little bit on this. If above $1,000, again, requires quote documentation, quotes, and it has to be awarded to the low quote. They are required departmentally to maintain documentation to support their delegated purchasing. Above $10,000, they've got to send it through the central office, through our procurement division, because then we are going to engage in a competitive bidding process so that we can make a selection based upon that competition. I want to also say that you can go out to our website, excuse me, and take a look at all of the signed delegated authorities with every department head. So those letters of authority are signed by the department head and they're signed by me, and it details what authorities they have under that delegated purchasing. Okay, another methodology that we use to procure is what is called an invitation to bid. You'll also see that listed as an ITB. It's a simple invitation to bid, and what it does is it establishes the specifications for what we're seeking to buy. It will establish a schedule by which, or when we need it, the time by which we need it. It gives all of the conditions, delivery, all of that kind of thing is listed in that invitation to bid. It does require the procurement non-discrimination program outreach that Brian spoke about earlier. And there's going to be that consideration for your small business or service-disabled veteran-owned business status. So an invitation to bid is really something, or a procurement method that we use when what we're buying is really subject to a certain level of uniformity. We're going to buy a chair. We know that the chair has to have legs that are at least, 24 inches long, and it's got to be, black, and it's very clear-cut specifications. And for the most part, the greatest thing that we're looking for is how much you're going to charge us for it. And so that's what you'll see on invitations to bid. The procurement code and the regulations give us zero room to make any kind of modifications or to negotiate, because it's strictly based upon price. We also use requests for proposals. And in an RFP, that's where you're going to see it be a little bit more subjective, because what we're wanting to do is to be able to engage in what the code calls comparative evaluative judgment, meaning I want to know how you're going to provide an offer for what we've requested in the RFP or a proposal against what you've offered, and be able to engage in a comparison, not just upon cost, but upon all of the variables. What is your plan of approach? What is your experience? What is the qualification of your team and of your firm as a whole? All of those things we want to be able to grade you, for lack of a better term, and be able to compare you against other offers or against other proposers. The RFP is going to establish the objective, what Metro seeks using this request for proposal. It's going to establish the requirements, which is to let you know exactly what those requirements and conditions are. It's going to also provide you with the evaluation criteria, and typically that is going to be project and approach. Again, it's going to be qualifications and experience. We're going to be looking at cost. We may be looking at references, but all of those evaluation criteria will be listed out, very specifically for you. And you'll also know how much each one is worth. So you'll get some sense of what the weighting is there. You'll know based upon that which of those criterion are most important in terms of the response. What you need to be able to, how you need to be able to respond based upon how they're going to be weighted. You'll also know what the maximum points is for each one of those criterion. And then cost is only one of those criteria. Again, we're buying the kinds of things with an RFP that cost is important to the city, certainly, because we have to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. But we don't want a low bid doctor. We want to make sure that we're getting the best price for that service. So sometimes you can see offers come in where it's very clear that the offerer has lowballed, as we call it. They've lowballed their submission to us. But then you can also look at the other criteria and see that they're lacking in other places. And so we don't want to be in a situation where the only thing that we're really focused on is cost for those kinds of solicitations. The regulations are also very clear. The procurement regulations lay out for us the conditions under which an RFP is appropriate versus when an invitation to bid is appropriate. And for an RFP, I want to note that we do give what we call a cost modifier. Brian alluded to this some. If you bring small business or service-disabled veteran-owned business participation to the table in your offer, then the value of your cost offer to Metro can be reduced up to a point, and we define that for you, by the amount of small business that you bring to the table. So for all intents and purposes, you've got small business participation. Your dollars may actually be 10, but for evaluation purposes, it might be 8. And that makes a huge difference when you're duking it out on points for cost. That's our effort to support the inclusion of small businesses and service-disabled veteran-owned businesses in the process. Okay, so to talk a little bit about sole sources, again, very clear instructions in the procurement code and the procurement regulations about the appropriateness of use of sole source negotiations. When we're using a sole source, or when I'm approving a sole source, it is because it is so clear, again in my type A-ness, that this is the only solution out there. The answer cannot be from a departmental perspective, this is who I know and who I like. This is who I've done business with. I have to be able to be 100% comfortable that nobody else can provide this service. There are some, or this product, there are some conditions listed in the procurement regulations that can be automatically considered for sole source, but they have to still be approved by me for sole source procurement. What we do is when we get a request from a department saying, hey, we want to make this purchase and this is the sole source, this is the only source that can provide it, what we do is we vet it. If we can get out and check, sometimes it's a simple Google search. If we can get out there and find 3 other firms who can do the same thing, it's not a sole source. We prepare a determination that indicates compliance with the code and the regs and either approves or denies the sole source. And we provide that to our departments because part of the process for us is we want to make sure that they're trained and understand how to comply with the procurement code and the procurement regulations. I'll get to you. The procurement code and the procurement regulations as it relates to sole source. So it's got to be the only source out there, and it does often require some back and forth with the department. But once we come to a consensus, and I completely am convinced that it is a sole source, then I will approve that sole source request, and it may be a sole source that is effectuated via purchase order or a contract. It just depends upon what it is. This says sales source, but it's really sole source. Or brand. Sometimes it's not so much that this is the only place that we can buy this. Sometimes it is, this is the only brand of product. There are a variety of different distributors or folks who can actually provide it, but for whatever reason, this is the only brand that we can use. Maybe it's compatible, compatibility, proprietary compatibility. We already have this specific brand and we've invested a lot in it, and we need to maintain that, or we're going to have to rip out everything and start over. If that's the case, then we have to have some conversations about whether or not that sole brand is the appropriate way to go. Yes, sir.
My question was about sole source and what the threshold you use to find that is. Is that within your own database, the sole source, or is that, hey, we go to Google and we're Googling?
No.
Those two are distinct, very different.
Yeah, no, we have roughly 20,000 vendors that are registered to do business with the city. They're registered in a variety of different commodity codes. We use what is called the United Nations Standard Products and Classifications Services Classification System, UNSPSC. And that, it's just a code. It is for classification purposes, but it doesn't always give you all the detail to know exactly what somebody provides. So we're not going to limit ourselves just to that because we can't always get to the heart of whether or not you provide the service that may be looked for in a sole source. But we also don't have any restriction on geographically where people can be located. So we're going to look anywhere in the U.S. If you are available to provide the service, then we should be soliciting this and competing it to make sure that we're getting the best pricing for the city. Any other question before I move on to cooperatives? All right, the other methodology or another methodology that we use is what is called cooperative contracts, cooperative agreements. TCA allows for municipalities to participate in what is called cooperative purchasing, whether that be joint solicitations or whether that is, for lack of a better term, I think people know this term, what they call piggybacking, meaning, somebody from a specific municipality, their procurement division has, entered into a contract for chairs, and it's exactly what we want. It's exactly what we need, and the pricing is very good in there. It's probably better than what we got it for the last time we solicited it. We have the authority, as granted by the statute, as well as by the procurement code and regulations, to then engage in what is called cooperative purchasing and to buy off of that contract. So that is something that is available to us with other states, with other cities, and with purchasing cooperatives, which some people know of as kind of group purchasing organizations or GPOs. Okay, So talking a little bit about our tips for responding to solicitations. You've got a sense of how we buy, the various methods that we use, what you can see coming out, how you can expect to see a notification via email that we're looking to purchase something. Now we want to talk a little bit about some tips for making sure that you understand how to respond. I thought that was a question, I'm sorry. Before we go into that in more detail, I want you to know that when we do solicit using the methodologies that we talked about, there are two different ways or two different outcomes to those solicitations. We're either going to enter into a purchase order with you, or we're going to issue a purchase order, or we're going to enter into a contract. Purchase orders usually will result from the invitations to bid that we talked about. Those are simple. Again, there's specifications in that invitation to bid. They carry over to the purchase order. Those purchase orders have very specific terms and conditions. You have to accept it during the solicitation process. And this is true for purchase orders and contracts. What we're going to do is attach a copy of that purchase order or the contract to the solicitation. And so we want you to know up front, when you're considering bidding on this, what we're going to expect you to agree to or to sign on the back end. And so you have to accept it during that process. If you have an issue with some of the terms that are in there, you have to take issue with it during the solicitation process. If you submit your offer, it is an acceptance of the terms, and then you don't have an opportunity afterwards to come back and say, I don't like this term or condition. I'll get to you. I don't like this term or condition, and I can't meet that. You accept it, and there's a specific element of the solicitation where you attest that you accept the solicitation as it is. And if you check that, you've really waived your right to protest it. So it's important to bring up those issues while the solicitation is open. Yes, sir.
My question indeed was about non-compliant bids. From your first few slides, I understood that you don't really deal with non-compliant bids at invitation to bid. You probably consider more of them under request for proposals. So with what you've just described there, though, you suggested that you might enter into negotiations even under ITBs. There is some back and forth you've just described about people not accepting terms. Could you talk a little bit about how often you actually deal with non-compliant bids and what ratios between ITBs and RFPs you do that?
Well, I probably can't tell you the ratio because I don't have those numbers just like in top of my head, but I want to make sure that I understand what you mean when you say a non-compliant bid.
So I see an offer, I can imagine size and skills that I have might enter into it, but I might think, for example, actually I think the scope there, the project I'm looking at should include something I do, and it doesn't, or I think my skills are so specialised that they should be separated, or so I'm going to submit I'm not going to comply with the whole of the request, but I've got some specific thing I would like to be involved in the project some way, but it's not dealt with in the way you've laid it out, so I wish to bid, but not complying with the way you've laid it out.
So,
that's what I would call a non-compliant
yeah,
bid.
what we call that is a non-responsive bid. So if you've submitted a bid and it's not responsive because it does not materially meet the requirements of the solicitation, if it is an invitation to bid, it will be deemed non-responsive and not considered. There is no room for negotiation on an invitation to bid. Even with the terms of the purchase order that might be attached, if you attempt to take exception to it, you're going to be told that you have to accept it on an ITB. The only place that you're going to have room to make changes and to take some real exceptions that could then be established in a contract is typically on a request for proposal. And the reason that that is the case, and I'll get into that in some more detail, the reason that that is the case is because the way that the procurement code is written, it allows us to engage in what is called discussions with a vendor who submits an offer in response to a request for proposal. And so what we have to ascertain even there is that you have the potential to be what is considered, or that you may be what is considered potentially acceptable, even on an RFP. So when you submit your offer, you submit your proposal for an RFP, we can look at that response and categorize it three ways. unacceptable, you just did not meet what we requested. And we see that sometimes. Potentially acceptable, but we need a little bit of additional information from you to make sure that you're acceptable, or it's clearly acceptable on its face. If it's potentially acceptable or acceptable, then the procurement regulations allow us to then engage in discussion with you to clarify and to get to the heart of the acceptability of it. So we don't know necessarily that it's non-responsive. You know what I mean? If we have some sense that is potentially acceptable, we can ask you some questions. We have to afford the same opportunity to everyone to ensure that we have equal treatment. But it does allow us, the regs do allow us to then engage in that discussion with you. And then once we've come to some sense of the answer, that helps us better understand the scope of your response, then we're able to incorporate that into the evaluation. That is strictly on an RFP. On an ITB, the purchase order is attached, and you've got to accept it. If you reject it, it is non-responsive.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Any other question?
In that same question, he does this specialized thing, but let's just say there are other companies that are going to respond to you that do everything else. Is it up to basically his responsibility to have a relationship to maybe he could be included on the front end with this other company and then have him as a part of them when they go?
I mean, that is part of your teaming work.
Okay.
That's part of your teaming work. I tell people that it's a business decision you have to make. Do you want to bid this thing on your own? And we're going to get into more details about that. I'm not just going to talk to you guys today about what the process is, but I want to talk to you too about some things that you can do, some pitfalls you can avoid, some red flags that you don't want to have raised up, that'll help you to respond most effectively to the solicitations and hopefully impact your success. So I'll get to that a little bit. Remind me if I fail to, because I got a ton of slides. And I'm looking at the time, and I think I got 25 minutes to get through all of it. Anyway, the terms and conditions must be accepted during the solicitation. PO terms and conditions, again, are just as binding as those in contracts. Typically on contracts, it's the result of an RFP, specific T's and C's as well. They must be accepted during the solicitation. There is room, as I described to this gentleman here up front, for you to take exception. You have to enumerate what those exceptions are. There are some, typically where it is in the contract. There are some exceptions that the city just cannot go for. We are not gonna find ourselves typically in any kind of situation where we're gonna engage in any kind of indemnification. That's something that usually is a no-go. But what we end up doing is going back and forth a lot on the contract to make sure that we have some agreement and understanding during the process. And if they take some exceptions to the contract that are just absolutely, we can't do it, it's a violation of law or something like that, then we're not going to accept that. We're not going to accept that exception to the contract. Typically, contracts are going to have a fixed price. They can be modified via an amendment to the contract. They may run multiple years. Brian talked a little bit about indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts, and those are ones where we know we need to buy office supplies, but we don't know if we're going to buy $5 million in office supplies or 15. So we'll have an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity specification on the contract. They usually run for 5 years. I will say that if we have a contract that does have the need to be beyond 5 years, it is required to be approved by council. It has to go to council, and council has to authorize that extended term of that contract. And they are generally multi-departments. So we usually are making enterprise-wide procurements. They're not just, project-specific procurements when we use an IDIQ. We're buying office supplies, we're buying temporary staffing services, we're buying landscaping services, we're buying janitorial services. We know that all of our departments are going to need those, but we don't know exactly the extent to which they're going to need them, so they're going to be what we call an IDIQ. Okay, so to talk a little bit about solicitation requirements and some things that are important for you to think about. There are 5, specific points that are listed here. Specifications, the schedule, quality, your capacity to perform the work, and your past performance. So as it relates to specifications, and you brought up a really good point right here as it relates to the specifications that I wanted to talk with everybody about a little bit, which is when you read the specifications that are laid out in the solicitation, you need to really make sure that you understand what those specifications dictate. You know, do you understand them? Do you need any additional clarity? Do you think after reading them that the specs are proprietary, meaning you only can provide this specific kind of brand, if you will? You can get it, but you need to make sure you know that this is what Metro's looking for. If we're going to allow you to provide, you know, Eco chairs or another kind that has everything in the spec, we'll say that. We'll say provide this brand or an approved equal, and that equal has to be approved up front. We'll tell you whether or not it's approved. Do you think the specs are restrictive? Meaning, the way these specifications are laid out in the solicitation, it looks like this thing is written for one offer, one bidder. And do you think that it limits competition? Because of the way you've written the specs and you've written them so tight, again, there's only one, you know, person, one entity that can bid on this. If you think that's true, if you need clarification, if you have questions about the proprietary nature of the specs, if you think that they restrict competition, they're restrictive and limit competition, you need to ask that question up front. Because you can always ask the question, and depending on the answer you get, you can protest. You can protest the solicitation even before it's awarded. Because what you're saying is, you've written this thing in such a way that it almost seems like you've written it for somebody you know who you want to write it for. And if you think that's the case, I want to say first, make sure that that complaint is with grounds, that you have a basis for that. But if that's the case, you have to say it up front. Because if you go ahead and submit your bid, then what you've told Metro is, I accept the solicitation the way that you've written it. And you pretty much waive your right to then protest the solicitation. All right, looking at the schedule, which is another element. Do you understand the schedule? Are there milestones or specific elements of the schedule that require you to do certain things at certain times? Can you deliver on that schedule given your current work? What is the impact going to be on your current work? What about any pending jobs that you have coming up? What is the impact of the schedule that Metro's asking for on those upcoming jobs that you have? Are there any potential risks with your ability to meet the schedule? And if so, what are you doing to mitigate those? So you want to contemplate all of that in preparation of your response. I would say that, in an ITB, these things are going to be very specific. Capacity and past performance, not so much, not considered really. But the specifications, the schedule, and the quality are going to be enumerated very specifically. We need grade A this. We need it delivered the 15th of every month. We need it to be boxed this way and delivered to this place. We're not asking you for anything other than a dollar number. We're telling you exactly what we want to buy, and when you submit your offer, you're saying to Metro, I promise I can deliver all of what you just asked for. On an RFP, you're going to tell us, because you want us to know why your offer and the way that you can do it is superior to the other offers. And so you want to make sure that when you're providing that information, that it is not contradictory to other elements of your response. Sometimes what we will see is in one evaluation area, offers will say, I can do this, I can do that, and I can do this. And then they respond in another area, and it contradicts. And we can see that. And those are going to be places where you're going to be dinged in the evaluation. So you want to make sure that all the information is correct and that you're able to respond appropriately on each one of those. As it relates to quality, you want to make sure that you understand the quality that Metro's looking for. I did do that. That you understand the quality, that you can deliver it, that you understand any potential risks that go along with that and how you can mitigate those. You want to think about capacity based upon the potential volume. What you'll see often in RFPs is, especially in those indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts, where we don't know exactly how much we're going to buy, But what we will tell you is what we did the year before, or what we did under the life of the previous contract. So you can get some kind of ballpark of what exactly we may be, what you may be able to expect. You want to make sure that you have the capacity to deliver based on what Metro's specific needs may be. If you don't have it, can you get it? Does it mean you have to ramp up, get a little bit more staffing in, find some additional outlets for some products to make sure that you can potentially deliver it? If you can't, it's going to be a problem in the performance of the contract. Again, what effect does it have on your current work? Are you going to be funneling everything into delivering on this contract for Metro, which then means you're going to be missing out on these other 2 clients that you already have, or customers that you already have, which can be a problem as well. You also want to be able to detail for us what your past performance has been. And, I recommend that we're not going to tell you that you have a 100-word limit when you're responding to an RFP. If there's some lessons that you've learned from some previous engagements, let us know about that. I think it's important that you let us know about it, because if we ask for references, we talk to anybody else, they're going to let us know. And I've seen, most people say, well, you're only going to give those references that are going to give you, a good report. That's not always true. I mean, I've called references myself that I was really kind of surprised that the offer even listed them as a reference. So you want to make sure that when you're talking about your past performance, that if there were lessons that you learned from your engagement with the city of Dallas, that you talk about that, and you talk about how your work is impacted now to account for those lessons that you've learned, and make sure that you have good information around your communication with the department contact. All of that kind of thing is important. Okay, moving on. In summary, thinking about all of those elements that I just discussed, at the end of the day, what you want to do is make sure that you under-promise, over-deliver, meaning when you respond on a solicitation, don't say, I can deliver the sun, when all you can do is deliver the treetop. Because if you say that, I can deliver the sun, Metro's going to be looking for the sun. And when you can only deliver the treetop, it bodes poorly. It looks poorly for you in terms of your ability to deliver on what they use to grade you, basically, and determine that you were the best selection for this contract. It's better to say, I can deliver the treetop, and actually deliver the sun. That's the better way to look at it. So always under-promise and over-deliver. And that under-promise needs to be in conjunction with what you can do, meaning, you might be able to deliver the cloud, but say I can deliver the treetop or somewhere in between there, but don't say you can do more than you can actually do, because at the end of the day, it can be problematic. I also recommend a closeout report at the end of the contract, meaning you want to summarize the successes, whether it be against your budget or performance, because these are all things that end up really being a part of a reference check, if you think about it. How well did they deliver what you asked for? Did they do it on budget and on time? So you want to make sure that you also provide that. Some red flags that we look for or that can be present in the process. These are red flags that Metro sees in that solicitation process, red flags that you should be looking for when you're thinking about a response to a solicitation, and red flags that can affect the results. I think I jumped the gun on my red flags for the response, but we'll talk about it again. Red flags in solicitations is when we tell you what the specs are very clearly, and that there are no approved equals allowed, but you come in with some substitutions anyway. That's a red flag, and you're going to get deemed non-responsive for that. If the submission is incomplete, meaning we can tell that you were doing this under the gun and you only got part of it in. Do you not have the subcontractor licenses or even the contractor licenses that are required? If you don't have the contractor licenses clearly enumerated, we can't even open your bid. And are there any clear monetary limitations, meaning, is it clear to us, based upon your response, that you have the ability to deliver the contract from a fiscal perspective? Red flags for you, problems that can arise for you in the execution of a contract or working for Metro. You didn't account for the total cost. I have seen a lot of businesses who really want the work with Metro, and they will undercut their costs so much that they almost pay us to deliver on the contract. That's not what we want to see. We want it to be a mutually beneficial opportunity for us and for you. We want to get the best product or service, again, at the best price with maximum social inclusion. But we also want you to be a viable business partner with us. And so we want to make sure that you're accounting for all your costs, whether that be delivery costs, whatever it costs for insurance or bonding related to the contract. You need to also think about the impact of the delivery of the service or product on your cash flow. Back to what we talked about around capacity, making sure that you're able to keep your business afloat. We don't want a contract with Metro to sink your ship. We want it to be something that helps you to develop buoyancy for your business so that you can continue to grow and thrive. And if you didn't account for contingency, and that's just a business model thing. Are there some unknowns that may arise that you didn't really account for, but you still have to deliver to Metro? You want to make sure that you're accounting for those things as well. And then in terms of the results, again, you fail to make a profit, or back to, you undercut the price so much. You delivered it, but good grief, after it was over, you're $100 in the hole, and I'm just using $100, but that can happen. Or you fail to pay your suppliers, in which case they're not going to be your suppliers for long. Or you fail to pay your subs, in which case, again, they're not going to be your subs for long. Or the worst case scenario, is that you fail to perform on the contract, and that can be very problematic for you. I mean, you're basically in breach of the contract, you can't deliver, and there are some remedies that are available to Metro if you fail to do so, which can include whatever it costs for us to reprocure these services that we may not execute or we may execute, but it's still a bad situation when you've been unable to deliver to perform on the contract. So I want to talk a little bit now about what the protest procedures are, and we're going to go quickly through this. But we've talked about how we procure, the various methods that we use, the outcomes, whether it's a purchase order or contract, what you should be sure to look for and to account for when you're submitting an offer. Once it's awarded, let me take that back. You can protest the solicitation. You have to do that before the solicitation closes. But you may also protest an award. So once we make an award, if you think, hey, you didn't do something quite right, either in compliance with the regs or the code, or in compliance with the solicitation that you put on the street in the first place. In that solicitation, you said you were going to do this, 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 and this, and you did something else. You have the opportunity then to protest that award. It should be within 10 days, and the way that the regs read is 10 days of when the aggrieved person knew or should have known about the award. And so we notify all vendors when those awards are made, the ones who submitted offers. And so you have 10 days from that time, and that's 10 calendar days to lodge a protest. Typically, once you protest it, it's in a stay. We have to stop everything unless I, along with the department head, determine that what we're buying is of such a critical nature that we've got to keep moving with this. It's really kind of a emergent situation, or it's the kind of service that's really going to just halt Metro government if we stop it. And in those cases, we would proceed. But typically, whenever there's a protest lodged, there's a stay, and we kind of stop that process until we get the protest resolved. The basis for the protest, again, technically, they're procedural mostly. And we didn't comply with the solicitation. We violated state law. We violated our own local procurement law. We violated our own regulations. Once those protests come in, I then acknowledge the receipt of those protests, and then I schedule what is called an administrative hearing to allow the protesting party to express their basis of protest, to hear all of the evidence, if you will, and then make a decision about whether or not we complied with our solicitation, the regs, the code, et cetera. If I say, yep, I think we did everything correctly and your protest is dismissed, That protesting party then has 7 days to appeal my decision, and that goes to the finance director. The finance director serves as the chair of the Procurement Appeals Board. The Procurement Appeals Board chair must be notified in writing, typically U.S. mail or hand-delivered mail to the finance director's office, and a copy to me saying, I want to appeal the decision around this protest. Those meetings are open to the public. Folks can come in and, witness those meetings if they'd like to, and we notify all the parties, basically, that it's been appealed. Once the appeals board has heard that appeal, they're then going to issue a written decision about the appeal, whether they agree, and if they agree with the protesting party, they'll give instructions, which means send it back to purchasing and have them do it correctly here. Or we don't think that you have a basis of appeal, and we uphold the decision of the purchasing agent. The next step or the next option for anybody who doesn't agree with the decision of the appeals board is basically to file a suit in Chancery Court. I mean, that's what your next step is in that process, because you would have exhausted all of the administrative remedies that are available to you within Metro. Okay, as we prepare to wind down, I think I've got 5 minutes. I want to talk to you really quickly about some takeaways. When you're preparing to submit a response to Metro, you want to make sure that you have a business plan or a strategy for how you're going to deliver. You want to make sure that you read the solicitation document. I can't tell you how many times it's obvious that people have not read it throughout. There are elements of the solicitation that, it's very clear, it's boilerplate. But I recommend that you read everything, because it's really easy to try and determine what's boilerplate and what's more pertinent to this specific solicitation, especially for people who've bid with Metro multiple times, and you can miss something. So make sure you read the solicitation, and make sure that your own business objectives align with the objectives of Metro as demonstrated in the solicitation. Takeaway number 2, make sure you read the solicitation. It's important. Read the solicitation. Make sure you understand how we're soliciting. Make sure you read the solicitation document. And then ask again, do my business objectives align with Metro's? Takeaway number 3, make sure you understand the specifications, the schedule, the quality, and understand whether or not you have the capacity to deliver. And make sure that you understand how this is going to impact your business, meaning what is the impact on the current work that I have and perhaps future work, and then my reputation if anything happens where I can't deliver this. So you want to make sure that you're able to deliver on that specific contract or purchase order. Takeaway number 4 is read the solicitation. I'm sorry I keep saying it, but it's so important. You probably wouldn't be surprised how much people don't read, but people don't read a lot. Read the solicitation. Again, under promise, over deliver, and submit a closeout report. Takeaway number 5, read the solicitation, identify Metro's objectives, make sure that you understand iProcurement. I want to say this quickly, and Jamie's in the back of the room. We use an electronic procurement system. It's called iProcurement. It's an Oracle-based system. Everything is submitted via iProcurement. The time to get in and start playing around with iProcurement is not an hour before the solicitation is due. Because if you've never been in there, you're gonna run into a problem. It is just how it's gonna happen. You're gonna find something that you don't understand. So you wanna make sure that you go in often. Even if you're not gonna bid on something, go in and take a look at it so that you can gain some degree of familiarity with the system. It's important to do that. We do have people who miss, once the deadline comes, the system shuts it down and you can't submit anything. And we'll have people call us and say, oh, I was trying to submit it and it's 302 or it's 303. We can't accept it. So you want to make sure that you're familiar with iProcurement on the front end, and Jamie's available to help you if you have any questions. You want to make sure that you account for all your costs and everything that it takes for you to be able to deliver. You want to make a profit. At the end of the day, you want to make a profit on it. We don't want anybody to go out of business because they delivered a product or service in response to a solicitation to Metro. That's not the goal. Takeaway number 6, make sure you manage your performance, that you provide solutions, be extremely communicative. You know, we've got 52 departments and semi-autonomous boards and commissions. They all buy different things. So you're gonna have, depending on what you're bidding on the Metro, you're gonna have different points of contact at different times. And you wanna make sure that you've got good communication with your point of contact for that specific piece of work that you're doing. Make sure it's value-added work, and then read the next solicitation once you're done. Read, read, read. All right, thank you so much. Anybody have any questions? We finished right at 12 o'clock.
I just want to openly thank you for the extra detail that you gave.
Thank you. Thank you, I appreciate it. Anybody else, any other questions? I have cards in the back of the room. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact me. Honestly, the best way to reach me is via email. If you're unable to do it even via email, because I do get probably a couple hundred of those a day, make sure you reach out to Judy Cantlin, who's in the back of the room also, and she can connect with me directly. Thank you so much.